Hi, we're going to look at our second poem in the poetry anthology today. We're going to look at One Flesh by Elizabeth Jennings, and this is on page 16, so you now need to turn to page 16. We're going to follow the same process that we did with the manhunt, so I'd like you to create a mind map or bullet pointed list of any connotations or associations linking to the poem's title. Again, use the questions to guide your thinking about labelling the types of words, what the poem might be about, whose perspective it might be from. Pause the video and complete this task. Give yourself about 1 or 2 minutes on this task. Hopefully you've realised one is a number and flesh is a noun. Flesh may seem a little bit more intimate, so linking it back to the relationship, maybe it is a relationship between two people, could be lovers, could be a marriage. So thinking about it, what the poem is about. I'd now like you to read the poem. So read through the poem and write a brief summary of what you believe the poem is about. There is a glossary on screen here for some of the words you might find a little bit difficult. And again, thinking about the questions at the bottom. So what does the imagery suggest? Whose perspective might it be from? And is there more than one theme? I want you to pause the video now, read through the poem, and then write a brief summary. This time, I want you to have a look at the image on the screen and then reread the poem and write down what you now think the poem is about. So you can see a couple turned away from one another. So read through the poem again and see if you can figure out what it's about. Okay, what is it about? This is Elizabeth Jennings. She's a poet and she's written this poem from her own perspective. She's observing and recounting details about her parents' passionate marriage through a sad and nostalgic tone. And their separation is both physical and emotional. Elizabeth Jennings was also a devout Roman Catholic. What do you already know about this religion's view of marriage? So I'd like you to pause the video now, make a couple of notes on this, and have a little think about what you already know. Think about Romeo and Juliet and what you know there. A little bit of context for you now. We're going to go back to the title. So the title, One Flesh, could link to the Bible and this quotation, and he too shall be one flesh, so linking two people as one. It could also link to the creation story where Eve is created from one of Adam's ribs, so they're created from one flesh and become two. It also links to the idea of marriage, linking two bodies, so two people become one. And it also links to sexuality and intimacy, which is a little bit ironic for this poem as the couple are not intimate. So pause the video and make any notes on this particular context. A little bit more context. Jennings' poetry explores religion, love, death, suffering, and loneliness. So you might want to make a note of which of these themes are relevant within this poem in your annotation. Jennings also never married, which is quite interesting when she's exploring her own parents' marriage and her views on that. Also, this poem is an ode. An ode is a lyric poem addressing one particular subject and usually in praise of something or someone. So have a little think now. What do you think Elizabeth Jennings is praising within this poem, if anything? So pause the video and complete this task. Okay, we're going to begin looking at analysis now. We're going to start with structure because we find it a little bit more difficult. So below you can see the whole poem on the screen in front of you, split into 3 stanzas, each with 6 lines in, so these are sestets. Below are 3 statements. Can you match the correct statement to the correct stanza. So I'd like you to pause the video now and match these statements to the correct stanza. Okay, so the first stanza looks at the physical separation of her parents, how they are physically apart when they go to bed in separate beds doing separate things. The second stanza, it looks at as if her parents' passionate years were a preparation for their isolation. So they will have been passionate at one point because they do have a child, but now they are completely separate, yet still married. And finally, the last stanza is a realization that time has altered her parents' relationships, and the poet wonders if her parents have also noticed this separation within their marriage. Going a little bit deeper into structure now, one of the first things you can look at after identifying the topic of each stanza is the rhyme scheme. So if you look at the rhyme scheme of this first stanza, the end word is bed, and the next line it ends on late. Bed and late do not rhyme, so we label bed A and late B. Third line, childhood, again doesn't rhyme with either of the previous words, so this would be labelled C. Fourth line has wait, so wait and bed, no, wait and late. These do rhyme, so this line would be called B, or labelled B. And finally, the last two lines end in unread and overhead, and both of these rhyme, but they also rhyme with the first one. So the first line, so this is A and A. This rhyme scheme is quite steady and gives a repetitive feel. When you look at the other stanzas, compare it to those. Is it similar? Is it different? Maybe thinking why. There's mostly about 10 beats in each line, which gives a monotonous feel representing the relationship. This stanza also ends in a heroic couplet, so it's iambic pentameter, that dun dun, the 10 beats, stressed and unstressed, which you've seen in Romeo and Juliet, and it's a couplet, and it helps to reinforce their binding marriage. It's almost like they are trapped within the marriage. Or you might read an alternative that it shows that there is still love between them because of the rhyme. You might want to pause the video and take some notes on the structure of the first stanza. We're now going to look at the language choices. If we look at these particular words, apart, separate, and elsewhere, this shows the gulf, the gap between the couple. So these words have deliberately been picked by the poet to show the separation between her parents. We've also got him keeping the light on while he's reading, and her rolled over, possibly, looking at the shadows overhead. So you've got a contrast between light and dark imagery here, and the contrast between the two. It also says that she, like a girl dreaming of childhood, so you've got a simile here, and it shows that she's maybe thinking of a happier time, as we usually associate childhood with positive connotations. So she's, maybe we could interpret it as her not being happy, and she's wishing for the past. You've also got they're quite disjointed in what they're actually doing, but there's a lack of interest as well. So neither of them are talking. He's got a book, but he's not reading it, and she's staring like absent-mindedly at the shadows. So they are just sleeping in separate beds, but living apart. There is nothing between them. There's no communication between them. So you might want to pause this video now and jot down the notes on language analysis. What I'd like you to do now is to see if you can annotate the additional two stanzas, analysing both structure and language. And I'm giving you a hint here. So look at the rhyme scheme. Does it end in a rhyming couplet? Has the writer used any language devices such as similes, metaphors, or personification? And has the writer chosen particular words for effect? You might want to look up certain words like flotsam and Google these, maybe look at images as you go through. So pause this video now and spend about 5 or 10 minutes going through and seeing if you can independently analyse the next two stanzas. Okay, I've given you a YouTube link in the description to help you check your annotation and understanding of One Flesh. It is important that you attempt to independently analyse the poem first so that you can have a personal perspective. It also gets you used to looking at poetry without my help or the help of the internet, which you will need in your GCSE when you look at unseen poetry. So do attempt this first independently, but then feel free to go onto the YouTube video and copy down some of the annotations that are present there. Final thought. What do you think Jenny's final message is about marriage? If you email me your answer, the top answers will receive achievement points. Well done for making it through another poem, year 10.